you like movies and television? Would you like to learn more about the magic behind the movies and learn how they get from the minds of the creators to the screen? Do you consider yourself a bit of a film buff and would like to know more without going back to school? Then this is the show for you. Mincing Movie Magic is a broadcast designed to stimulate your intellect and explore the minds of screenwriters, producers, directors, and others behind the scenes who create the real magic we see on the screen. Each week, you can listen to screenwriter and producer Tom Blomquist and professional magician Scott Wells as they discuss film and the magic that goes into every production. From time to time, they welcome friends from the movie industry to give other points of view that brought their visions to life on screen. This is Mincing Movie Magic. Please welcome Hollywood writer, producer, and director Tom Blomquist, along with your host, Scott Wells.
And there we are. Hey, cheers, Sticks. How you doing, man?
How you doing? I'm doing very, very, very well. Thank you so much, Scott.
Glad you're here this week. Again, we have another fine guest. We've been having a lot of wonderful people who you've been bringing on from so many different backgrounds. And I think that's part of the fun, certainly for not only me, but also for, I believe, the guests, the people who are watching the show to learn so much. And let me also suggest for those of you who are watching this, if you're enjoying this, you probably have friends who would enjoy this as well. Please share this and let people know on Facebook on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock Central. We have this always a delightful chat with someone and learning a little bit more about the background and what's going on. What is it that makes movies magic and television and everything then too? And there are so many different facets to discover week after week. And for some reason, I think Tom must owe a lot of people. A lot. So he's getting some good people.
And in fact, I do. That is true. But also people should realize that these are recorded so they can watch them later on Facebook or on YouTube. And so they will live forever. And I'm glad people are enjoying them. And I'm very excited about our guest tonight because she has been a friend for a long time now, since the 90s. Peggy O'Neal is her name. Those of you who have not seen the promotions. She is an actress who has drifted into voice acting as a specialty. There's some of her anime characters that she has voiced and created, and it's a real specialty. People know what actors do, but there's a whole universe of voice acting that goes on behind the scenes that I think people will find very interesting. And many of these titles mean a lot to people, and the video games that she's done and the voices she's provided on 300 or 400 hours of network television shows. So let's bring her in. Let's meet Peggy O'Neal.
And there she is. Hey, Peggy.
Hey, guys.
So glad that you could join us here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And you're joining us from let me say, first of all, cheers.
Cheers to you.
Yes, she's in Beverly Hills.
You're in Los Angeles, correct?
I am in Beverly Hills.
Okay.
But Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the hub of where all this happens, because as you got involved with this, I mean, this Tom and I were talking about this earlier today. This is not really a career that can get jump-started in Sioux City, Iowa. I think you needed to be in the right place to be there at the right time, right?
At the time I started, yes. But because of COVID, we've done a lot of remote recording. So voiceover has become much more national, and people can record from their home studios and get involved and take off anywhere, really. So it's an interesting time for the VO world.
Yeah.
And then there's what we'll talk about, Scott, is that there's really different segments, and they're separate, distinct. There's the loop group segment, which would be harder to do, I think, Peggy. Don't you agree? Remotely, you kind of need the group there to do stuff, probably. And then you've got animation characters and video game characters, and then, of course, straight radio spots and things like that, voiceovers for movies or industrials and commercials. So a lot of different specialties, even within the specialty of voice. So anyway, why don't you tell them how this started for you? Because you're a theater actress and an on-camera actress. That's how this all started in your professional career. But somehow you found yourself voicing
right.
for a show in Orlando.
In Orlando.
Well,
I started out working on stage in Equity Theaters in Florida, Florida Studio Theater, Tampa Players. It was wonderful. I worked for about 10 years on stage. And during that time, I was very lucky as a young actress. Universal Studios and Disney Studios both opened up studios in Florida. And so I got to start doing some guest stars on television shows, which is where I met Tom on Swamp Thing. And as I was doing that, one of the line producers I knew called me because they had an inexperienced actress who needed to have a voice replacement. Her performance didn't quite meet what they wanted. And so they hired another actress to come in and revoice her, and that didn't work out. And so Steve thought of me, and he said, hey, would you come in and do looping for this? And I had no idea what it was. And I went into the studio, and I put on the headphones, and I heard the beeps, and I had no idea what they were for. But I ended up replacing that actress's vocal performance. And it's very, very interesting. That was my first looping ADR job, and that is part of the movie magic. Sometimes the voice you hear is not the person you see on camera.
Yeah, by the way, Scott, ADR is automatic or automated dialogue replacement is what it's called. And ADR is a vital part of the post-production sound process.
Gotcha.
Because, when you're on a set, the lead actors are talking, and there may be 50 people in the background. And it's a busy restaurant, and everything. Well, none of them are actually talking. And somebody has to create that background. So that would be what we call a loop group. And then there's these situations where you have to revoice an actor or add a line. The actor, the actress did her role. She was great. And then she left. And then 6 weeks later in editing, they realized they need to add some dialogue for her, and she's maybe not available. So you find someone like Peggy who can approximate her voice and add those lines off camera to make it the mosaic of sound authentic and real for the audience.
Well, I was going to go back for just a second. I guess since we started at the beginning, was Swamp Thing one of the first things that you'd worked on there, Peggy?
Well, Swamp Thing I was working on camera, and that is how I met the line producer that I worked with, who brought me in later on Fortune Hunter. And he asked me to replace that actress's voice. And I ended up doing ADR on that show, on Pamela Anderson's series V.I.P, Hulk Hogan's old series Thunder in Paradise. So I started doing the group stuff after I did that first voice replacement. We call it a voice match. And that is how my ADR career started. And there's me on Swamp Thing. Tom brought that up.
Very young Peggy O'Neal. At age 12, I think you were, right?
I think I was 27 or 28, actually. I was kind of ripe for an actress in Florida.
And that was the actor who played Swamp Thing?
Yeah. No, he was Mark Lindsay Chapman. He played the evil Dr. Arcane. Okay. Played by Louis Jourdan in the movie. And Mark played him in the series.
Okay.
So that was my on-camera guest star role on Swampy. And that's how I got to meet all these crazy people. I guess they liked me. I guess they liked what I did. He brought me in to do ADR, additional dialogue replacement, on Walker, Texas Ranger that I worked on for 8 years. Ended up working on Dawson's Creek and CSI New York, CSI Miami, Bones, Friday Night Lights, a bunch of different series. So that's how I got started in voiceover. So
Peggy, explain to them, we'll talk about the loop group stuff, like Dawson's Creek. So they call you in and it's Wednesday and it's a 1 hour episode. How long will you be in the studio? Is it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? How much time do you spend, and with how many actors in a room creating all that background?
It depends on the show. It really depends on how big the scenes are, how many scenes they have in it that require a large group. Generally, it's 4 to 6 actors. We can come in on a small show and knock it out in maybe 2 to 4 hours. So that's why everybody loves doing ADR. You can go in for a half a day and earn your week's salary. But something like Public Enemies, I did ADR on the film with Johnny Depp. And we were on the stage, the sound stage, for 8 hours. And we had 20 people in that room. And I think they worked for 7 days on that. So it really depends on the scope of the show or the film.
And how many microphones would they have on the stage at that time?
Well, generally, we would work with one, and we would be the group walking around it. There's, if you get into ADR speak, you do a donut. You might do pass-bys to simulate the action on the camera. So if you see a couple walking past the principal actors, the voice actors will actually walk past the one microphone and create sound for that imaginary couple who's going by in the background who's not actually speaking. But when you watch a show back, if there are people in the background and you don't hear any background noise, it looks really bad. You can notice it. You don't notice good ADR. You only notice bad ADR.
That's true.
And you know, Scott, they do this in layers, you know, so like 4 or 6 or 10 hours. So they're doing one pass after another, recording many, many tracks. So let's say you got a guy in the background and he's, you know, at the table. Well, now somebody has to figure out what the hell is this guy plausibly saying, and then it's really fun to watch the loop group actors try to construct what they could say that would approximate the lip movement and the gesturing. Whether is he angry, is he happy, is he laughing, what is he, and what accent might he have, and then they come up with this stuff, and then they layer it in, and when you mix it all together, however many passes they do, it suddenly sounds like the real world. And the better people like Peggy, you know, she could play 5 different characters, you know, with different ages and accents or dialects or whatever, you know, to add even more texture. And it's really fun to watch. I mean, watching you guys do that stuff always blew my mind.
It is really fun. And I tell my students, you have to have really strong improv skills because you have to be able to make that stuff up on the spot. And you have to be able to do different dialects. You have to be able to play different ages. You know, if they have a restaurant scene and you only have 5 actors and you have to pretend to be all 40 people in that restaurant, you might have a little kid over there going, Mommy, I'm tired. I want to go home. And then you might have, you know, an older couple in the corner. What do you think you want, dear? And then you have to change your voice up. And then, as Tom said, you mix it all together like in a mixing bowl, and it's magic. It's movie magic.
It literally is magic.
Yeah.
Well, I've often wondered about that. Whenever I see people in scenes and they're talking, I'm assuming that they are just mouthing words and have no dialogue necessarily. But let me ask you then also, Tom, as a script writer, did you ever write dialogue for some of these background actors, but saying don't say the word, but mouth the word, so to make it easier for the loop groups?
That stuff is usually not in the script, but after the show is edited, and you have the dry tracks where it's just the main actors talking and everything else is silent. As you're editing the show, you realize extra lines of dialogue would be very helpful to tell the story. And so if you have your lead actors available, you might do what we call ad lines for them to say, you know, I say, Scott, how you doing? And then that's all is in the dialogue. But maybe then when we cut to you want to still hear my voice say, wow, you look great today. Well, you look great today was never in the script, and you have to add that in through the ADR process. And if the actor's not there, then you have to find somebody that can fake it. And Peggy, was it David Niven? Who was the famous actor who died? I think it was David Niven in the his last Pink Panther movie, but he died and they hadn't finished the movie, and they brought in Rich Little, the impressionist, who did all his lines. And I think he may have even had throat cancer or something, and he couldn't speak
something like that.
well.
I just saw that recently on an episode of CBS Sunday Morning that they did an interview with Rich Little, and they were talking about that, and they showed that very scene where he's talking there, and Rich had done
I think he was near death when he did the film. If I don't know, Peggy, you may remember all this, but
I think that was his last film.
You know, but those incidents happen, and Peggy revoiced that actress, and you know it was Schwarzenegger's first movie. They didn't feel anybody can understand him because his accent was so thick. So they brought in an actor to voice him in that first Conan the Barbarian or whatever that movie was. That's not him talking. Maybe they have now gone back to his actual tracks because he's a famous actor now. But back in those days, he was just a bodybuilder, and
he probably had a pretty thick accent back then. And
it's still thick now, so you can imagine then. So
sure.
Anyway, so. Peggy, tell them, if you would, then how you went from doing the voices on TV shows, and there's just tons and tons of them. If people look at the promo for this episode, I mean, you've been literally a part of every show.
Yeah.
But how then did you train? You came to LA and you were doing all those shows. How did you transition into video game audio and Japanese animes of all things? How does that happen, and what's that like compared to the other kind of voice work?
And I'm guessing you're really big in Comic-Con.
I've done a few of the conventions like Nandesu-Con, and I go down to Comic-Con for the panels and stuff. So that is a completely separate world, and it's got its own unique take on things. For me, I fell into it accidentally. I came to LA, as I mentioned, and Tom was great, and started working on Walker, Texas Ranger and some of those other series. And I thought, well, I want to kind of explore this voice acting stuff. And I took a Susan Blue, who's amazing. She was the original Smurfette. And I just took like a 6-week course. And one of the girls in class was like, hey, you're pretty good. Do you have a demo? And I said, well, I really don't. I just got here. I just started this. And she said, well, let me take some of your recordings from class to my friend. And he was Paul DeFranco, who was the casting director for all of the Saban stuff at the time. And so she brought him my tapes from class. It wasn't even professional. And I started doing background stuff on Flint the Time Detective and Die Gunder and a few other shows. And then within a short period of time, I booked my first series lead, which was Shinzo, and I was Yakumo in that. And then the Digimon series, I played various characters in all the seasons, the first 4 seasons. And I just kind of took off from there. And I loved doing it. It was the closest thing to stage that you can really get to. You get to play a bunch of different characters and really dramatic scenarios that you don't get to do so much on TV. And then somebody I knew from the anime world said, hey, I'm going to a party. Do you want to come? And they were the people that I do most of my video game work with. And so one thing leads to another. That's what I tell my students all the time. Just say yes and go work and do good work. And then somebody will say, hey, come play with me for a while.
So I'm running through some of these pictures where you have that you've been involved with. And so let me ask you, how do you learn to pronounce these names then also?
I was really bad at it. Sometimes I couldn't even say my own character's name. I wish that I knew now what I didn't know then and had taken a few Japanese courses. It was difficult. You know, sometimes the director will have to correct you. But some of the English translations, the dubs, they decide to go with a more English name or a more English version of the name. So you muddle your way through.
Scott, I would also put some of those pictures up. Do you have them handy?
Yeah, we should be. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that I was starting to share them. Hold on. That yeah, I was. Yeah, let me.
There we go.
There we. Yeah. Okay. So.
So a lot of these don't mean anything to me, Peggy, because I don't know these shows. So you may have to tell. Like, what is your favorite? Well, he's kind of going through these. What are
There's Power Rangers?
Obviously, you know, major title, Digimon, major title. Those I know I've heard of. What are some of the other like iconic titles of shows that maybe I don't know?
See, I can't pronounce that one. Takikomas or something like that.
Tachikomas. We are robots. You'd have to like the show. But Ghost in the Shell is one of the better known ones. Wolf's Rain is a beautiful production, fairly well known. Digimon is the reason that I have the automatic cool card with my college students because they all grew up watching it. They're like, I watched that when I was a little kid. So Eureka 7 was pretty popular. I played a couple of different characters in that one. So if you know anybody who's into the anime world, they'll know Futaba and Code Geass. Yeah.
Futaba. Okay.
I could be butchering it. Don't quote
Peggy, you show up and maybe you've never seen the show. And they have the animation all done, and you see the character like this one here. How do you create the voice that's going to match that character? How do you create?
Yeah, and how would that be different from the other one? they're all young girls.
So
well,
that's
challenging, is creating different characters, because often you'll get an audition and they'll have 7 different teenage girls. Now, how do you make them different? It's basically about the attitude of the character. Sometimes it depends on the producer. There's Susie and Digimon.
That's one of your more famous ones, right?
That's the one everybody would probably know, is Susie and Digimon. She's 3. And I decided, I had a little girl in my fairy tale theater class. I used to teach very young children for City of Los Angeles Parks and Recreations Department. And I had this adorable girl named Sarah, and she had a little bit of a lisp. So in our class, every day they'd have to say their name. Hello, my name is Sarah. And it was the cutest thing I'd ever heard. And so I decided to give Susie a little bit of a lisp.
So how does Susie sound?
And so, Henry, where's Terrierman? I can't quite get that high now because it was a few years ago. But she just inspired me to do her voice. And they had to actually run it through the producers and make sure that it wasn't going to be offensive, that she had a little bit of a lisp.
Yeah.
They were very careful about it. But
I hadn't thought about that.
Normal for 3-year-olds.
What it really does impress me about people being able to do this is, actors, the actors I've worked with as a director, they rely very heavily on their makeup and their hairstyle and the costuming and the sets that they're in. And you know how they embody the character. Laurence Olivier used to say, just show me what hat you want me to wear and I'll play the character. Well, you don't have all that. You have just your voice and a microphone in a room by yourself and pictures of these people and scenes with them. And I just find that amazing that you can still convey all the emotion without, facial things and just, decorative acting like I'm doing here with my hands. You can't do any of that. You can only do it with your voice.
Actually,
a lot of people can't do that.
Yeah, but to really be effective in the booth, you do need to still be somewhat expressive. You can't swing and hit when you're doing hits and punches because you might hit the microphone, but you still have to physicalize or it doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? But it depends. You have the director. It's really a team effort. You have the producers. They let the director know if they want it to be strictly matching the Japanese or if they want to be open to interpretation. And then the director will kind of get you back on track if you haven't recorded for a couple of weeks. They'll say, let me play you a sample, and they'll get you back into the character voice. So you do have some support and some help with that.
Well, I know also you not only do these voices for anime, but then video games as well. And is there a little bit of a difference when you're actually recording voices for one versus the other? I mean, do you have to do that over and over? Or I would imagine a video game, they go down this way versus this way. So you have to restate something. Anyhow, what's the differences there?
There is a difference. The anime, for us and the producers that I worked with, they would play you the scene and then you could, go along with it and watch the picture. In video games, most of the time you don't have picture. So you are going down an Excel spreadsheet and it has the line and then it might have a little bit of a note saying angry, confused, whatever. And then you just have to say the line and you have no idea what the context is. You just do your lines only out of context. So it moves really, really fast. You have to just make choices. And if it's the right choice, the director will say, okay, moving on. And if it's the wrong choice, they'll say, can you make them a little less angry? Can you let them die, from falling off a 10-story building versus getting stabbed versus getting shot? They're all different sounds. So it moves really, really fast and you just have to dive in. You can't hesitate. It's not like theater where you can say, well, I don't know. Can we talk about this? What is the character feeling? You just do it. You just throw it out there.
You mentioned about there being a director in there. That was one of my other questions. Is there someone kind of like the choir leader or somebody who is a director and having you do this, or let's do it again? Or is there the screenwriter in there? Or who?
There's a director and often one of the producers, at least one, if not more of the producers in the room, just making sure that you are staying on track. And it's really important, especially with an anime, because you've not seen the show. You've not read the full script. You are simply recording line by line by line, one after another out of context, and you depend on that person to guide you the right way. So it's really important to have somebody there directing and working with you.
Now, Scott, on the other hand, going back to the loop group stuff for TV shows and movies, there's a loop group leader. Peggy has been a loop group leader. She starred in a film that I did, and I remember a few weeks ago we saw some scenes from Prison Life, and Peggy was in that prominently in that film, and she also assembled the loop group and was the loop group leader. So would you explain a little bit, Peggy, because you're the conductor in that group. We were all there, but you were running it. How do you break down a script or the film that you've seen for loop group purposes for the other voice actors? And how do you plan it? Because you can't just walk in and go, what are we going to do now? You have to know, obviously, because time is money. Studios, we were at Warner Brothers for that one, and that's not inexpensive. So you want to get on with it. So how do you do that?
Well, you spot the show and you find out what scenes need background voices, and hopefully you cast people who are right for it. In Prison Life, obviously, you had mostly men. So I think, only had one other woman in that show. And you go through the time code and you set up, this scene is 20 seconds long and we need people in the prison yard. So I need all 5 of you guys out there. And then you do a general bed, which is just kind of a murmuring background. And then you do specifics. There's one guy over there and he's working out on the workout bench and he's lifting weights. So one guy is going, oof, oof, and then another guy's like, hey, what's up? And they do what they call call outs. And then they layer those sounds in together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an utterly fascinating process.
I'm sorry, what?
It's utterly fascinating. I've said it before, but it's one of the most fun parts of post-production for sure. Being just watching you guys from the other side of the glass, it's incredible. Because they are so precise. These people do this all the time. Some of them from one day to the next, going from show to show. And so they walk in, what do you need? Okay, got it, fine. And they're just like, okay, now they're doing the pass bys the mic, then those call outs. They just know the shorthand that they use with each other. They just know, and they'll watch it. Everybody figure out what they're going to do. Then they'll do it. And then, I can do better than that. Let's do another one. And it's great.
And that's what's nice when you're working with a group you're familiar with, is that you get a rhythm with each other and you know how to play off of each other. And that's really important too. It's really fascinating. And once my students are exposed to it, they're like, oh my gosh, I was watching this TV show the other day and I realized that they had bad ADR because this guy was talking right behind, the star of the show and there was no sound coming out of it. So it will ruin TV and movies for you for a while once you've discovered the secret of ADR. Like, wait a minute, that guy's not really talking, but his mouth is moving. And they didn't layer in a specific for that guy over there at the bar getting a drink. So it's
I was going to ask you a little bit about your students and your classes and what you teach. But before we do that, I want to mention I guess everyone to recognize, Tom and I were talking about this earlier today, your voice is your instrument. I mean, this is something that you have to keep finely tuned. And do you have some suggestions? I mean, as a magician, whenever I'm performing on stage, of course, projecting your voice and using your diaphragm and other kinds of things that you learn in acting, et cetera. But then also we have situations in which we're working in a strolling magic cocktail party situation, or even worse yet, in a loud environment like a nightclub where you have to be speaking over the in a wedding or something like that over the DJ and everything else is going on, and so you have to speak loud. But there has to be some sort of way of projecting your voice without straining your voice. Do you have any tips or anything like that?
Well, I'm a certified Fitzmaurice voice work teacher, and
what? Say it again. A what?
Certified Fitzmaurice voice work teacher. There are several different pedagogies that go with voice work. There's Linklater, Lessig, and others. And I chose to get certified in Fitzmaurice voice work because it's really kind of a whole body approach. And it has to do with breaking down the tension in the body so that your mechanism is free and relaxed and open. And it's a really long explanation, so I'm not going to get into too much detail, but it's kind of a practice that you can do to break up the tension that you might hold in your rib cage, which affects your ability to have your ribs spread and have a deeper breath and drop down into your diaphragm. It teaches you in the latter part of the training to use your abdominal muscles to help you project your voice and squeeze the air out, if you will, and do it in a controlled manner. So there's 2 steps to the process. One is destructuring, which breaks up the tension in the body, breaks down the armoring in the body. And the second one is to restructure, which is to teach you how to breathe properly so that you can support your voice and not strain yourself. So that's the short explanation.
Are there some things also as far as sprays or gargles or something like that you recommend? I know opera stars and different people who do use the voice a lot like that. Sometimes might get laryngitis or something. So, there you go. What have you got there?
At one of the studios where I do video games, they call it kitten juice.
Kitten juice, okay.
Yeah. It's a Chinese herbal supplement, honey loquat, and it will definitely make you purr like a kitten. It's great stuff. That's what I recommend. If you have congestion, I love the Breathe Easy teas. Those are 2 little tricks.
If you have don't smoke and don't drink. I remember you telling my film students that at Cal State Long Beach when you would be a guest speaker in my directing class that just that'll trash your voice and really give you problems, right?
Those are the basics. Never smoke. Don't smoke. My mother died of lung cancer, so I'll use my 2 seconds to say, please don't smoke. Additionally, hydrate. If you drink alcohol, if you drink caffeine, that dehydrates you. So try to cut that back as much as you can. Don't drink coffee right before a show.
Because you have to keep this all lubed up. You need fluids, right, in your throat.
Yeah.
But not lactose. I understand. Nothing, no dairy or anything.
No milk. That'll create phlegm. So even like people will say, well, tea with honey. Well, if it's not an herbal tea, if it has caffeine, that's going to dry you out more. So don't do that. Use a humidifier if you're in a dry atmosphere. Use a diffuser with some essential oils. I love the one called Breathe Easy that has eucalyptus in it, just to kind of keep the sinus passages moist. There's a lot of different things you can do for your voice.
What if you have laryngitis? Is there a way to cure that, or you just kind of wait till it's over?
Once you have lost it, there's no getting it back except for vocal rest. So don't do it. Don't let it get that far. If you feel it coming on, stop talking.
But doesn't that have something to do a little bit, though, with stress as well, not just overuse of your voice?
Well, we were talking about body armoring and tension and holding muscles, so absolutely.
So, Scott, I directed a play in Los Angeles, and Peggy was the assistant director and also the vocal coach. And you might wonder, why would a professional actor need a vocal coach? Don't they know how to do that? Well, they do, but they don't. And Peggy, you can explain this better than me, but it's a lot of the stuff she's talking about now, which is how do you relax? You're doing the show 3, 4, 5, 7 times a week, and you need to channel all this stuff in the right direction, the instrument, like we call it, right, to do it right. So can you explain a little bit what that process is like? The what was it, tremoring? What did you call it? What is that?
Tremoring. You use modified yoga poses, and you put yourself into a position where the autonomic nervous system takes over, and a specified muscle group will begin to tremor or shake on its own. And that will help to release the stress and the built-up muscle tensions that you're holding, whether it be from physical trauma, emotional, psychological. And if you go through all of the different sequence, all the different poses in the sequence, you're releasing the tension through the body. And, think about it. If you're stressed out and you're angry, you're upset, you tense up. And that is the worst thing you can do for your voice. And it affects your breath, which affects your creativity, which affects everything. So without getting too metaphysical about it, it's a long-term solution. It's not something you can go, oh, I'm going to do that once or twice and I'll be fine. It's not a quick fix. It's something that's a practice.
So it's a good idea, basically, before a show. I'm thinking like, I don't know, Madonna, Lady Gaga, somebody who has to kind of focus, stop, and take some breaths, or anytime anybody's going to be going out, an actor on Broadway. When you walk out on the stage, you just kind of have to take some breaths, and there's something to that, just to kind of relieve the stress. So you don't. Are butterflies good or bad?
They would say that excitement and anxiety are flip sides of the same coin. You just have to learn to channel it and to manage it.
I had a friend once say the best thing is to try to have your butterflies fly in formation.
I think that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. It really is.
You know, there's vocal warm-ups, you know, that singers especially do. I mean, they should do them every day to strengthen and use their vocal instrument. And so those singers, you know, Lady Gaga, with her big pipes that she's got, you can bet she does her warm-ups during the day and before the show and all of that stuff, right, Peggy? I mean, they're not kidding around. If you don't do that and you're a professional singer, you will shred your vocal cords eventually.
Yeah, someone just said, George Thompson, I broke all the rules. Drank cigars. But years being a brass player and on-air DJ gave me a break in the VC.
Yeah, there's something to that, though, George, and we talk about it a lot in vocal practice, which is it's considered a cool, edgy voice to have that kind of cigarette huskiness.
Yeah.
Which is great while you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, and then you get into your 50s and 60s and you lose your voice completely. And it does other kinds of damage to your vocal cords. So we talk about trying to reverse the trend of like, oh, I've got that kind of vocal fry that Kim Kardashian has, and like, oh my God, it's so
I hate
cool.
that.
We call it texture. And a lot of the anime characters, they want them to have that kind of like, hey, I've got a texture to my voice. I'm a tough girl. And you know, I have this very clear bell-like voice, and like I can do the texture if I want to. You know, I can put it on, but I can like feel the tension in my throat when I do it.
Does it hurt your voice? I mean, if you do it for a long period of time?
Oh, there's certain characters that are crazy, like Susie, because she was so high after a 2-hour session, I'd be tired. The Screen Actors Guild actually has worked on like getting stunt pay, hazard pay for voice actors who do video games, because it's a lot of yelling, screaming, dying, and I've literally like ripped my throat out a couple of times, screaming and dying. And
for video games, you mean?
For video games.
Yeah.
And some of the anime gets pretty crazy.
That does answer a question then also. Well, actually, Tom had told me this earlier today, but I just want the rest of the people to know this as well, that you are a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and this is acting. I mean, with the voice. I mean, so you have full benefits and card carrying and everything. Yeah.
They're members of the cast. I mean, they are members of the cast. And you look on IMDb on a movie, and they'll list the on-camera people, and then they'll have the voice actors in many cases.
No,
a lot of the time, ADR, it's not in our contract.
For ADR. Well, some of them will list.
I have to for IMDb, I have to actually go in and add that in, and it goes under miscellaneous crew because it's not in our contract.
Huh. You can do that? I didn't know you can add something in IMDb, like Wikipedia or something?
You can add it, but they have to check it. And once they've checked it, they'll approve it and put it through. But like, I'll have my IMDb page, and it looks like I've done like 70 productions, but then you click on miscellaneous crew, and there's another 40 below that. And I think it's because they gave us such a good lucrative deal on the contract. It pays really well to do ADR, that they kind of had to give up something for that, because we get residuals, and a lot of the voiceover work we don't get residuals on. So I'm guessing. I don't know. I have to talk to Zach about that.
So there are things then obviously you do that get recorded and can be put in a sound effects library. And that, do you just get paid a flat fee, or do you get royalties on that, or a little bit of both?
I've never had anything put into a sound effects library. So
I thought maybe like screams or whatever that you're doing, you know.
You know, it's part of the contract. Like if you have a contract to do an anime, it's a different dubbing contract from when you're doing an ADR job on a network show. It's a different contract from when you're doing a video game. It's a different contract for a commercial. It's a different contract for promos. So every voiceover category is covered by a different contract. And most do pay residuals. We worked really hard. Yeah, verified and unverified. We worked really hard to try to get video game residuals, but we failed to get that with the producers on the last round negotiations.
So have there been some favorite voice acting jobs that you have had, whether it's been for on screen or through a loop group or for anime or for gaming or anything else that comes to mind? It's like, I would rather just, this is what I want to do, and I like this a lot, or I had a good experience doing this, I would like to do that again.
I really love doing anime. I loved Shinzo a lot. Some of the video game stuff is really fun and really wonderful to do, and then you get to see the final product, and it's really fun. I like it all. I mean, you're acting. You've got an acting job. You're getting paid to act. It's great.
Well, there's got to be something though also that's going to be your least favorite. I mean, there's some things that it's like, okay, I'm going to take this check. I mean, I've seen some actors who it appears that's all they're doing is just wanting to get a check. I watched a movie recently with Nicolas Cage, and I thought, he's just wanting to cash a check.
Well, he might have needed the money, but that.
I think any day that you're acting and you're getting paid is a good day. I really, there are situations where we're uncomfortable on set. Sometimes, I used to say you meet the absolute best people in the world, like Tom Blomqvist, and sometimes you meet the absolute worst people in the world, and not much in between. But it's really about people. If you have a good crew.
You mentioned Johnny Depp a little bit earlier. Then also, are there times occasionally when you do get to meet the actors and actresses who are in the show, or are you mainly, I guess, just kind of in a separate studio and a sound booth?
We're usually like doing looping, and if a principal comes in, they kick us out and they bring the principal into the room for the ADR work.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they do their work and they're out, because all on-camera actors, everyone that's ever lived, hates to come in and do ADR after the fact, because they all say, I gave you everything I had on camera. Why didn't you get it recorded right? I loved what I did. Now you changed the lines on me. That's not right. And they hate it. And it's like pulling teeth to get the stars of the show to come in and
redo it.
Even though they're contractually obligated to do it, it's very difficult because they just don't want to do it. They're tired. They don't want to come. They don't want to redo something they think they already did. But there's technical reasons why the microphone, there's too much noise. There was an airplane flew overhead. Something happened, and they have to replace that dialogue. And they're there, and they have to do it. But it's miserable. So if they get Johnny Depp to come in on a day to replace his lines, believe me, they're gonna kick Peggy and her friends out until that. He won't be there long, by the way. He'll be in and out. Scott, okay. Would you put up the promo that Peggy just performed in for my book? Because it's a perfect thing. You
want to do a setup on this?
Only that. Let's show it first, and then we'll explain how it actually was made. And
so roll that beautiful bean footage.
And now a devious confession.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 2 chapters since my last confession.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, it's been 2 weeks since my last confession, and I accuse myself of the following sins.
Yes, my child.
I've been reading a book, and it is causing me to have devious and lustful thoughts.
I see.
I don't think you could possibly see, because it's this amazing book called Devious Thinking by Tom Blomqvist, and it is funny, witty, and naughty. But in a good way. It has these 2 women who try to get revenge.
Well, revenge is a sin.
Oh, but these guys deserve it. And the way these women get back at them is so sexy and smart, and I just wish I could be like them. You know what I mean?
Is devious D-E-V-E or D-E-V-I?
D-E-V-I, like devil. And the book is wickedly funny. I can't wait to see how it ends.
It's available on Amazon for paperback and Kindle.
Of course. Devious Thinking by Tom Blomqvist. It has 5 stars.
Got it. All right. Spend a little more time in the good book for your penance.
Will do. And it's not just a good book. It's a great book.
Devious Thinking, Misadventures and Getting Even, a revenge comedy by Tom Blomqvist. Available at Amazon.com. Go in peace, my child.
So
Yeah.
Peggy, tell
Great commercial.
them from your point of view how this came to be.
Oh, I just got an email from you and Jeff, and they're like, hey, do you want to record this? So I recorded my lines, and Jeff recorded his lines separately, and we never talked in between. And he put it all together, and you put it to the video. And so this is what remote recording is like. You can do remote jobs.
Yeah. So Jeff thought of this, and he created it. He wrote it. He edited the audio track, Scott. And then what I got was one audio performance, a radio play.
Right, basically.
And I went looking for stock footage. That's all stock footage of the priest and the woman and the church, and from many sources, and tried to put that together. And the trick was the shot through the mesh of the woman talking, sliding that, and it almost is in sync. I mean, it's so funny. It's pretty close, considering it's just stock footage from Romania or something of some woman. It's hilarious. But it's cheesy and supposed to be, because of course the book is cheesy and ridiculous. So, but the performance that Peggy gives is wonderful. I mean, all the little nuances in the voice and she's so excited and titillated, and I mean all of that stuff. It's naughty. It's really
it is. And another thing I notice is the elocution. I mean, the attention to each syllable and the way that it was pronounced, so that it was very clear. None of the words are mumbled or muffled or anything. And so I think that's something, again, as a voice person, you have to be able to enunciate perfectly. And you do. I mean, just as we've been talking throughout here, I've been paying attention to the way that you've been speaking, but particularly when we see one of the examples, I mean, goodness, I mean, that was amazing.
Thank you.
But it's, you're talking about somebody sitting in her home in Los Angeles, creating a character based on words that are given to her.
Right.
And all the little nuances. There was nobody directing her. Just, it's a naughty and, I feel so, all those little things, it's colors. There's a lot of different colors in her voice in her performance. And then you put it against that cornball stock footage that I found, and Jeff did a great job. He's a straight man, of course, and he's very pious, and until he's ordering the book himself on his phone. But I loved it. I mean, what these guys did, what Jeff wrote, what they both performed was wonderful, and people have responded in a really big way to this promo, and watching it on YouTube and all that. So
we've had a few promos out there, and I just had a guy actually I was talking to today from New York to say he was just watching one of these, and he said he was just moved to buy the book. It was really good. By the way, so they do work. So Chuck Arkin had asked Peggy using these voices for a ventriloquist act. You should.
Well, let's do it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny. So, Peggy, you mentioned the Fitzmaurice training, the certification, which is a big deal. How long? I mean, you have a college degree, you have a master of fine arts degree, and then you still decided to get further training in this one area. How long was that process to get the certification in Fitzmaurice?
It's a 2-year program. It's in that particular field and specialty. It's considered the equivalent of a master's. So.
Wow. Okay. And Scott, she teaches at Moorpark College, has been a fine theater program in Los Angeles. So you're able to apply not only your acting training and your theater experience and all of that, but this voice specialty in those classes, right? What do you teach at Moorpark? And your kind of schedule, different classes that they've given you to teach, and what specifically applies to your voice training?
Well, the reason I went ahead and got the certification is that the voice and diction course that I teach is transferable, and I wanted the kids who were going on to 4-year schools to have the basics down, so that when they got to their 4-year school, they already, had some training in this voice pedagogy. What's really cool is when I'm able to get into a large enough space to do the work, we'll do Fitzmaurice voice work for the first hour. And then the second hour, we'll play around with voiceover, do voice recordings for animation commercials. We'll explore all the different areas of voiceover. But when I'm able to do the Fitzmaurice voice work, it's kind of magic. It's like the movie magic, but theater magic. You'll do the Fitzmaurice voice work and go through the sequence for an hour, and then suddenly, your voice drops down into your chest voice, and everybody's very full and resonant. It's like this magical miracle that happens in the body, and then suddenly I'm doing all my video game villain characters. The students are like, "What are you doing? You're making me do yoga." And then after the hour's done, they're like, "Oh my God, that was amazing. I want to do more of that." And I was like, "Okay, you just got to take my word for it. Get into the yoga positions and let's tremor and vocalize." And it feels very strange. But once they've done it a few times, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that makes a huge difference." It really does.
How many hours a week is your class? I mean, is it, do you mean 2 or 3 times a week, or with the class?
Well, everything's a little different right now with COVID.
Well, sure.
We were remote for a year. And when we come back into the fall, we may do like half on campus and half online.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of waiting to see, but usually it's 5.5 hours twice a week for 2 hours and 15 minutes. And that's ideal for the Fitzmaurice training, so that you have, time to develop a rhythm with it.
I know one of the things that you're proud of, because we've talked about it, but you've helped launch any number of careers for actors and voice actors, especially. I know you have, and we tell people about that, because it's, I was a college teacher. Yeah. Not every college teacher takes it beyond the classroom. It's like, my job is to shovel information at you, and then you do what you want with it. And then other teachers go the extra mile and make phone calls and try to help people actually start a career somehow. And you do that, and it's remarkable. So tell Scott and everybody about that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that.
Great.
One of my favorite students was in my very first class, and she was like, "I think I want to do this." And I encouraged her to take some classes where I was doing a lot of the anime work. And Lauren has been doing this now for almost 15 years. And she's probably done more anime than I have at this point. It was a wonderful experience for me to do Nandesukan in Denver with her, because we got to be on a panel together talking about our anime work. And she got to be Sailor Neptune in the reboot of Sailor Moon, which is one of her favorite shows when she was a little kid. So it's really wonderful watching things kind of coming full circle. It's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, I know you've shot a lot of short films with your kids as well, that you've written and directed and edited them for them to have things on for their reel, because it's important for actors to have a video reel and in this case an audio reel. So explain, how many of those have you done for students? I mean, there's a lot of them. I've seen many of them.
Yeah, when I teach acting for film and TV, rather than filming scenes that are pre-existing from famous movies, I thought I'm just going to do some original 1-minute scenes so that they can take that final scene from the class and they can use it in their acting reel. So I brought in a former student to write some. I wrote a couple of myself. And at the end of the class, we finished with 13 short films. And they were, full, complete shorts with beginning, middle, end. And everybody walked away with a scene. Some people walked away with 2 because we had to switch partners around. And you have to have a demo reel to compete as an actor in Los Angeles. It's not enough to have a headshot anymore. You have to have video on yourself. So I just thought, we're going to be filming scenes anyway. Why are we filming something from a very famous movie that everybody knows you didn't do, that everybody's familiar with? Let's do some original material or unknown material and give you something that will move you forward. That's my favorite phrase. What will move you forward? I don't do tests, final exams for my voice and diction class. I have them do projects. And they're like, "Well, what should I do?" And I'm like, "Well, you can do anything." "What? That's so confusing." I said, "Well, what is going to move you forward in your life? Do you want to be a stage actor? Do a monologue, do a song, do a scene. We want to be a voiceover actor. Put together a mini demo of 10-second clips of commercials if you want to go into commercials, of 6 to 10-second spots if you want to go into anime, and have yourself a beginning demo that you can move forward with. And some of the stuff has been really amazing. Some students shot short films. They did their own demos. Some recorded scenes and monologues so that they could then use that taped monologue or scene for their auditions for four-year schools. And that was something they wanted to move them forward with. People who are not actors at all. One gentleman had a bunch of family photos from a trip. And I said, well, let's put them together in a slideshow, and you can narrate it as the narrator of the slideshow of all these photos from your family trip. And then you have something to give to the next generation. So I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun teaching.
But it's unbelievably smart because for the actors, what good is it that they do a scene from Reservoir Dogs? How many times are you going to see the same scene? Or Goodbye Girl, or one of those iconic, Graduate or The Godfather? Because they're only going to be mimicking, in some version, what they've seen on screen.
That's right.
And as a producer, I don't want to watch that crap. I don't want to see you do a scene from, some movie that I know. It's like, no, I want to see your acting. You're not going to reinvent the wheel. You're going to be mimicking whatever it is, but if it's original material, they can actually do what actors do, create a character, find nuances, and do all the stuff. And I mean, it's so smart that you have them do that. And a lot of acting teachers don't do that, sadly, at a lot of schools. And it's because it's easier for them to just say, here's some scenes, pick one and do it. And it's too bad. It doesn't work in service of the students' career ambitions. I know that for a fact.
Well, we also talk about branding, archetypes, what kind of roles are you suited for in the industry, so that they start getting smart about marketing themselves. And so the scenes are custom written to fit their brand, their type, their personality, who they are. And that's much better than giving them a scene where they're playing a 40-year-old having a divorce from a husband and they've never even been in a relationship before. So it's really important, I think, to use material that's age appropriate, type appropriate. And
True.
That's another goal that we work toward is, figuring out what is your specialty? Where do you fit?
Where do you fit? Now, Scott, that is a major concept that actors struggle with their whole careers because it changes, right, Peggy? I mean, you're
right.
a 20-year-old ingenue actress and you fit in kind of a certain way in a certain category. By the time you're 40 or 50, how many times have you heard of people that struggled and did nothing and, did little odd jobs for 30 or 40 years, and then they have their big breakthrough and now they're a big character actor or better, in movies and Oscar nominated at things. But you never know when you're going to fit. How do you know? You can't know.
Yeah.
Well, you don't. I think it's the same way like whenever they make movies. You don't know that it's going to be a hit, and sometimes you think it is going to be good and it's not, and vice versa. So you just don't know.
Yeah. But actors, you think about what Peggy has done for many years, what her students are facing, of getting up every day and trying to say, okay, how do I push this boulder further up the hill? Mm-hmm. And you never get to see the top of the hill. It's just an endless, incline.
Sisyphus, yeah.
And how do they prepare? Who's preparing them? Well, in this case, Peggy's giving them all the right information. And I tried to do that when I was teaching, and other friends of ours that we know in common, Jeff Cook, who wrote that confessional thing, he's doing it at University of Oklahoma, giving them the right information and helping them, what's the word, Peggy, prepare or position themselves to try to keep moving forward despite all the obstacles and all of the rejection and all the things that don't happen. And then your look changes and your skill set changes, and you have to, what did Peggy say? How am I supposed to do that? Maybe I should call her. Hey, Peggy, it's been 15 years.
And they all have my phone number. I'm like, call me, feel free.
Well, that was kind of what I was going to end on, in fact, is just to ask you, as we start to wrap up over here, what kind of advice you might give to those who are wanting to get into this field, and how they get started, where they need to go, and what kind of training they need to have. If there could be something online, which I guess there is now that you've been doing online, or is there a nearby school they should be attending? Anyhow, what's your advice? What do you think?
Are you talking about nationwide, or are you talking about locally here in Los Angeles?
No, I think nationwide. I'm just speaking to the world, I guess, at this point, wherever people happen to be. I mean, are you saying they should move to LA, or can they stay where they are? I mean, of course, you now do have that opportunity, but a lot of that still comes down to networking, I think, and being in the right place, of course.
It really does. I mean, I just was talking to one of my screenwriting students from the other college I teach for, and, he's in New England, and I'm like, well, it's fine, and I suppose you could do something. And my biggest piece of advice to all of my students is this is a very young industry. So if you want to do this, even if you just think like, oh, I kind of wish I could do this thing, whether it be acting, writing, directing, whatever, don't wait. Do it while you're young. For actors, some agencies have categories of 18 to 25-year-old departments where they bring in new talent, fresh talent, and they develop their careers. But, so many times when I've been teaching, I've had, even when I was teaching back in Florida, somebody who comes back at 40 or 50 and says, I built my career, I did my job, and now I have money, and now I want to pursue this. And I'm like, well, you can do this, and I hope you enjoy it, and it's wonderful, but it's a very young industry, and the likelihood of you getting that first job acting when you're 40 and you have nothing on your resume versus when you're 18, and they'll forgive it if you don't have anything on your resume, is pretty big. I'm not saying it's impossible, so don't give up if you're 40, but if you are young and you're thinking about doing it, do it now. Give it some time. Give it everything you have. And then you can go back and pursue something else. So that's my biggest piece of advice.
Learn your craft.
Learn your craft, absolutely.
Writer. I want to be a Hollywood writer. Well, learn the craft of screenwriting. And it takes practice and study, instruction somewhere. And, when I think about, doing those Florida productions back, right out of high school, learning the craft of acting, that then led to all this other stuff and this amazing career that you've had. People, everybody wants to go to the finish line. I want to get right to the end result. No, you got to learn the craft. You're not just Itzhak Perlman, violin virtuoso the first day you pick up a violin. It takes a while, and some people get it faster than others, right, Peggy? I mean, some are kind of savants. They pick it up real fast, and others struggle for a long time to break down the barriers and channel all their inner stuff that they struggle with.
Not a lot of natural talent. It's something that is learned talent. I think sometimes people think, well, I don't have a radio voice, or I don't have the right kind of voice. But you're saying, I guess, it can be trained.
Well, it can be trained, but there are trends in voiceover. And, 5-10 years ago, it would have been the announcer voice. But now it's much more guy next door, girl next door, casual, real person. So it's much more open now than it was 5-10 years ago, but that could flip. In another 5 years, they could go back to wanting, I want the smooth producer, sound.
In a world where... Yeah.
Exactly. The Don LaFontaine, who was absolutely amazing. And there's a place for a lot of different people. You might not get the national commercial, but there's no reason why you can't do the local radio station advertisements and, start knocking on advertising company doors. And you could do something locally. And equipment is so inexpensive now. You can get a good USB mic for like $200. I know a lot of engineers would say, oh, you can't use a USB mic, but a lot of people will accept that as a studio quality sound, and start small and build your way up. Learn your craft, like Tom said.
Good advice. Good advice. Well, thank you very much, Peggy. That was great.
It
was a pleasure meeting you.
Great seeing you again, Peggy.
Good to see you.
Glad that you were here. Well, I'm going to take you out here for now, and with our thanks, and hope to see you again in the future, and to hear many more things coming from your voice, from you then too. Thanks.
Thanks.
So hang around, and we'll chat after we close out over here too. So, Tom, another great person in a completely different field. That was just kind of
a great person is the correct analysis there. Not just talented, but a great person.
Yeah.
And next week we have a cinematographer that I'm very excited to introduce to everybody. His name is Matt Irwin. He is Los Angeles trained. He was one of my students at Cal State Long Beach. We worked together on some projects. He has a Canadian passport. He returned to Toronto. He splits his time between Toronto and Los Angeles. Does lots of movies and TV shows. He's a very fine cinematographer, and so anybody that's interested in the lighting and the filtering and the camera work and film versus digital and all the kind of stuff that film wonks think about, Matt's your guy. And next week we'll have him, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to it. I'm glad that you had, again, arranged for another great person for next week and into the future then as well. So thanks again. I want to remind everybody, if you would, make sure if you enjoyed this, you have friends who like what you like, so be sure and tell them about Mincing Movie Magic on Facebook, and they should like this page and follow us, or they can pick this up then also on my YouTube channel. It's Texas Magician. So just go and subscribe to that, and you can find these also in both places, on YouTube and on Facebook, for past ones. And this was I think the 15th that we've had here this evening. And so, yeah, so we've been doing this for a few.
I don't know.
A few months, and with no end in sight at this point. So it's we've got just a lot more to explore and more magic to uncover as we mince through all of these movies, tear them apart, and transport. Anyhow, thanks again, Tom. We'll see you then next week, everyone.
All right, Scott. See you later.
Okay, Scotty out.
Thanks for being with us. Please join us again next time for Mincing Movie Magic.